Am I even alive? Or just a shadow?
You ever been ignored so hard you genuinely started wondering if you died and nobody bothered mentioning it? That was my life for 30 straight days. I'm Jason Mitchell, 43 years old, and I want to tell you about the month my wife Rachel and daughter Emma turned ignoring me into a competitive sport and how it all came crashing down at Emma's wedding 5 years later. This wasn't your average, "oh, sorry, didn't see you there" type of ignoring. This was calculated, deliberate, Olympic-level ghosting. The kind that would make professional mime artists jealous of how invisible I'd become in my own house. Picture this. Every single morning, I'd come downstairs with my coffee mug, plastering on my best good husband and father smile, and cheerfully say, "Good morning, ladies." What did I get in return? Rachel would lift her ceramic mug to her lips like she was performing in a Shakespeare play, taking these long, theatrical sips while staring intensely out the kitchen window. She'd literally make eye contact with a random squirrel in our backyard before acknowledging I existed. I'm standing there feeling like an invisible waiter asking if everything's okay with the meal. Meanwhile, Emma would be hunched over her phone at the breakfast table, shoulders shaking with laughter at whatever TikTok trend had captured her teenage attention. The girl would literally snort laugh at her screen watching some kid do stupid challenges. But when I'd try cracking a joke or, God forbid, ask about her day at school, she'd give me this look. You know the look, the one people make when they accidentally step in dog crap. After 30 consecutive days of living in this Twilight Zone nightmare, I genuinely started getting paranoid. Like, clinically worried that maybe I had actually died in my sleep and nobody had the decency to inform me. I caught myself checking mirrors multiple times a day to confirm I still had a reflection, testing whether I could still physically move objects around the house. You know, standard ghost detection procedures. I even Googled signs you might be dead at 2 a.m, which let me tell you is absolutely terrible for your mental health and your search history. The absolute breaking point arrived on a Tuesday morning. I remember it was Tuesday specifically because that's our garbage collection day, and apparently I'd been designated as the official trash whisperer of the household. I was dragging our bins down to the curb, fulfilling my civic duties like any good suburban dad when Mrs. Patterson from the house next door waved at me. Actual human interaction. Genuine acknowledgement of my existence. I almost started crying tears of pure joy right there on the sidewalk. "Morning, Jason. How's the family doing?" she called out cheerfully. "Well, they're currently pretending I don't exist, so I guess they're doing fantastic," I replied, attempting to make it sound like a joke. She laughed like I was being funny. If only she knew I was being more literal than a GPS system giving turn-by-turn directions. I headed back inside, feeling marginally more human after 30 seconds of actual acknowledgement from a 70-year-old woman who probably has more meaningful daily conversations with her 3 cats than I have with my own family members. Rachel was loading the dishwasher with the intense precision of a neurosurgeon, positioning each plate and fork like she was performing life-saving surgery. "Hey, babe," I said, leaning against the kitchen counter in what I desperately hoped was a casual, approachable manner. "Want to grab lunch somewhere today? Maybe that little Italian place you always loved?" She closed the dishwasher door with the kind of finality usually reserved for sealing coffins at funerals, then walked directly past me like I was a coat rack. Not even a "sorry, I'm too busy" or "not today, honey." Just complete and total radio silence. Pure void. That's when it genuinely hit me. I wasn't just being ignored anymore. I was being systematically erased. These 2 women had somehow collectively convinced themselves that I was less interesting, less worthy of attention than whatever algorithmic garbage was constantly feeding into their smartphones. Rachel probably had more substantial, meaningful conversations with her Pilates instructor than she'd had with me in the past several weeks. I stood there in my own kitchen, surrounded by the life I'd helped build over nearly 2 decades, feeling like a confused tourist in my own existence. The house was completely immaculate because I cleaned it every weekend. The bills were fully paid because I worked my A off at that soul-crushing insurance job 40 hours a week. The lawn was perfectly manicured because I spent every Saturday morning wrestling with that ancient mower that was literally older than some of Emma's high school teachers. But apparently, all of those contributions made me approximately as exciting as watching paint dry in extreme slow motion. You want to know what really twisted the knife deeper? That evening, I attempted one final time to connect. Emma was sprawled across the living room couch, still permanently glued to her phone, occasionally letting out these little giggles that made me think maybe, just maybe, she was in a receptive mood for conversation. "Hey, Emma," I said, settling carefully into my usual spot on the opposite end of the couch. "What's so funny over there? Share the wealth with your old man." She looked up at me with this expression of pure, genuine bewilderment, like I'd just asked her to explain advanced quantum physics through interpretive dance. Then she turned directly to Rachel, who was obviously pretending to read a magazine while clearly listening to every single word, and said, "Mom, did you hear something, like some kind of weird noise?" Rachel didn't even bother looking up from her magazine. "Just the house settling, honey. Old houses make those creaking sounds." I'd been reduced to creaking floorboards, random structural noises, ambient background sounds that old buildings make. That night, lying in bed next to my wife, who was somehow managing to occupy 3/4 of our king-size mattress while simultaneously acting like I was completely invisible, I had what some people might generously call an epiphany. Other people might accurately call it a complete mental breakdown. I prefer thinking of it as a sudden moment of crystal clarity. I realized I'd spent so many years desperately trying to be the absolutely perfect husband and father that I'd somehow managed to become neither one. I was like those generic store-brand sodas, technically containing the same basic ingredients as the name brand version, but somehow completely forgettable and vaguely disappointing. The thought that kept bouncing around inside my head like a hyperactive ping-pong ball was devastatingly simple. When exactly did I become less entertaining than a random dancing golden retriever video on the internet? When did my own family collectively decide that literally anything else in the entire world was more worthy of their precious attention than the guy who'd been consistently showing up for them every single day for the past 16 years? That was the night I knew something fundamental had to change. I couldn't keep living like an actual ghost in my own life, desperately hoping that maybe tomorrow they'd suddenly remember I existed. Because, let's be brutally honest, tomorrow was just going to be another identical rerun of today, and I'd already watched enough episodes of The Jason Show, where absolutely nobody's watching and the ratings are permanently stuck in the toilet. Let me take you back to when things weren't completely catastrophic. When I actually believed in fairy tales and genuinely thought love could conquer all obstacles. Picture this scene. It's 2007. I'm 26 years old, wearing a suit that costs significantly more than my monthly rent payment, trapped in the most mind-numbingly boring insurance seminar known to mankind. The presenter was droning endlessly about actuarial tables like they contained the secrets of the universe, and I was seriously considering faking a medical emergency just to escape. That's when Rachel Santos walked into my life like a Category 5 hurricane wearing designer heels. She was running late, naturally, because punctuality is apparently overrated when you look like you just stepped off a business magazine cover. Dark hair pulled back in this professional style that somehow managed to look both serious and incredibly attractive. She was wearing a navy blazer that probably cost more than my monthly car payment, juggling a briefcase, a coffee cup the size of a small bucket, and what appeared to be half the inventory of an office supply store. The universe, demonstrating its infinite wisdom and twisted sense of humor, decided that the only available empty seat in the entire packed conference room was directly next to me. Rachel navigated her way over, apologizing to everyone she accidentally bumped into, which was basically everyone because she moved like someone trying to cross a minefield while wearing stilettos. She finally reached my row, squeezed past me with more elbows and knees than seemed anatomically possible, and settled into her seat with all the grace of a giraffe attempting to fold itself into a compact sports car. That's when complete disaster struck. As she was reaching into her enormous bag, searching for what I assume was a pen, her elbow caught that massive coffee cup. Time suddenly slowed down like we were trapped in some cheesy romantic comedy movie. I watched that coffee arc through the air in perfect cinematic slow motion, a brown tsunami of caffeinated destruction headed straight for my brand new suit. The suit I'd specifically purchased for this seminar because my boss had said, "Dress for the job you want, not the job you currently have." Splash. Coffee absolutely everywhere. On my jacket, my shirt, my tie, my pants. I looked like I'd been baptized by an overenthusiastic barista. The entire conference room went completely silent except for the presenter, who kept robotically talking about risk assessment calculations like nothing catastrophic had just happened. Apparently, a grown man getting drenched in coffee wasn't nearly as important as discussing premium calculation methodologies. Rachel's face rapidly cycled through approximately 6 different shades of red before finally settling on something resembling a perfectly ripe tomato. Oh my God, I'm so sorry," she whispered frantically, desperately digging through her bag for napkins like she was searching for buried treasure. I sat there, literally dripping with coffee and destroyed dignity, watching this beautiful disaster of a woman try to fix what was clearly completely unfixable. That's when I decided I could either laugh or cry, and laughing seemed significantly better for my masculine reputation. "Well," I said, standing up and carefully inspecting the extensive damage. I was getting tired of this suit anyway. Very 2006. I was actually thinking of going for more of a coffee-stained, hobo chic look for this season. She stopped her frantic searching and stared at me like I'd just announced I was actually an extraterrestrial visiting from Mars. Then she started genuinely laughing. Not the polite, embarrassed giggle you'd typically expect, but this full-blown, shoulder-shaking, snort-inducing laugh that made half the conference room turn around and aggressively shush us. "You know what?" she whispered, wiping actual tears from her eyes. "You look like budget James Bond. Like if 007 did all his shopping at discount stores and got his spy gadgets from Radio Shack." Budget James Bond. Covered in coffee at the world's most boring seminar, I absolutely knew I was going to marry this woman someday. Don't ask me how I knew with such certainty. I just did. Maybe it was the way she transformed a complete disaster into something hilarious. Or maybe it was because anyone who could make me genuinely laugh while I was wearing half of Starbucks inventory was obviously someone incredibly special. We spent the remainder of that tedious seminar passing notes back and forth like we were mischievous high school students, making fun of the presenter's tie, which looked like it had been decorated by a colorblind peacock, and inventing increasingly ridiculous insurance coverage scenarios. What's the premium on alien abduction coverage? Do we offer discounts for people who've statistically never been struck by lightning? That kind of sophisticated intellectual discourse. That lunch turned into dinner. Dinner evolved into coffee the next day. Ironically enough, coffee transformed into a movie date, which evolved into marathon phone calls lasting until 3 in the morning, which turned into weekend trips and meeting each other's families and all that standard relationship progression stuff that makes perpetually single people want to vomit. Within 6 months, we were practically living together. Within 1 year, I'd proposed with an engagement ring that cost more than my car, but seemed absolutely worth it when I saw her face light up like Christmas morning. Within 18 months, we were married in a ceremony that my mother kept insisting was lovely, but probably cost more than some people's actual houses. Those early years felt like living in a perfect romantic comedy, where absolutely everything worked out perfectly. We had our own collection of inside jokes, our favorite restaurants, our Sunday morning routine of sleeping late and reading the newspaper together in bed. Rachel would constantly steal my hoodies, and I'd pretend to be annoyed while secretly buying larger sizes so they'd look even better on her. We'd playfully argue about whose turn it was to handle the dishes and make up before we'd even finished loading the dishwasher. When Emma was born 3 years later, I genuinely thought we'd hit the life jackpot. Perfect little family unit, perfect little house in the suburbs. Perfect little life, all mapped out ahead of us like a well-planned road trip. I was going to be that dad who coached Little League and patiently helped with homework and made elaborate pancakes on Saturday mornings. Rachel was going to be that mom who organized play dates and volunteered at school events and somehow managed to look absolutely amazing while doing it all. But here's the brutal truth about fairy tales that nobody bothers mentioning. They're absolutely fantastic until real life shows up and starts charging expensive rent. The turning point, the exact moment everything started going irreversibly sideways, was Emma's Sweet 16 party. That celebration wasn't just a birthday party. It was the absolute Olympics of disrespect, and somehow I managed to win the gold medal in getting completely disrespected by my own wife and daughter. Let me paint you the complete picture of the weeks leading up to this disaster. Emma had been dropping increasingly obvious hints about her 16th birthday since approximately 5 minutes after her 15th birthday ended. Not subtle hints either. We're talking about the kind of hints that would require industrial-grade construction equipment to possibly miss. She'd strategically left party planning magazines open to specific pages, bookmarked websites on the family computer, and even created an elaborate Pinterest board titled Emma's Epic Sweet 16 that had more pins than a professional bowling alley. Rachel, being the absolute queen of reading between the lines when it came to spending money we didn't actually have, picked up on these signals faster than a hypersensitive smoke detector in a barbecue restaurant. They'd huddle together on the couch for hours, whispering and planning like they were plotting to overthrow a small government, while I sat in my designated dad chair, wondering if I needed special security clearance just to participate in basic conversation. The party planning evolved into this incredibly elaborate production that would have made Broadway directors genuinely jealous. We're talking coordinated color schemes, multiple theme options, a guest list that got revised more times than a Hollywood screenplay, and a budget that kept growing like a malignant tumor made entirely of glitter and expensive teenage dreams. "Dad," Emma announced one evening, bouncing into the living room with the kind of manic energy that usually means my wallet is about to get significantly lighter. "I absolutely need a professional photographer for my party." I looked up from my newspaper. Yeah, I still read actual physical newspapers like some kind of technological dinosaur, and tried to process this request. "A photographer? Honey, I've got a perfectly functional camera. Remember the one I used to take all those pictures of you when you were little?" The look she gave me could have instantly frozen hell over and triggered a new ice age. It was the exact same look people give when someone seriously suggests using dial-up internet or paying for things with exact change. "Dad, I'm talking about a real photographer. Someone genuinely professional who understands lighting and angles and doesn't accidentally decapitate people in family pictures." Okay, so maybe I'd accidentally cut off a few relatives' heads in various family photos over the years, but in my defense, modern cameras have gotten exponentially more complicated than they used to be. Back in my day, you pointed, clicked, and desperately hoped for the best possible outcome. "Sweetie," I said, attempting to inject some financial reason into this increasingly expensive conversation, "professional photographers cost serious money, like mortgage payment money. How about we compromise? I'll watch a few YouTube tutorials, figure out how to not decapitate people, and we'll call it acceptable." Rachel, who had been pretending to read her book while obviously listening to every single word of this exchange, finally looked up with that perfected expression. The one that clearly communicated I'd just suggested we celebrate by literally setting large amounts of money on fire. "Jason," she said in that tone that could effortlessly cut through industrial glass, "it's her 16th birthday. This is genuinely important." Important, right, because apparently everything involving our daughter was important enough to require expensive professional intervention, while everything involving me could be adequately handled with a YouTube tutorial and desperately crossed fingers. But I wasn't quite ready to surrender yet. Call it stubbornness, call it stupidity, call it whatever you want. I decided to try a completely different approach. Maybe I could make them laugh, lighten the increasingly tense mood, demonstrate that Dad could still be fun and creative too. "Don't worry, sweetie," I said, standing up and striking what I thought was a professional photographer's pose, complete with imaginary camera and everything. "I'll just Photoshop your head onto Kim Kardashian's body. You'll look absolutely fantastic, and think of all the money we'll save on actual photography." I thought it was genuinely hilarious. I was mentally picturing Emma's face digitally placed on some glamorous red carpet photo, maybe with a ridiculous caption like "Emma Mitchell, reality TV star and high school student extraordinaire." In my head, this was absolute comedy gold. The silence that immediately followed was so devastatingly complete, you could have heard a pin drop in the neighboring county. Emma's face rapidly cycled through several interesting color changes before finally settling on something resembling raw hamburger meat. Her mouth opened and closed repeatedly, like she was a fish desperately out of water, trying to process whether her father had just made the worst joke in recorded human history or had completely lost his mind. That's not funny, Dad," she finally managed to say, her voice cracking like she was going through puberty all over again. Before I could properly explain that it was just a harmless joke, that I wasn't actually planning to Photoshop her head onto anyone's body, Rachel swooped in like Superman armed with a credit card and the fierce maternal instincts of a lioness protecting her vulnerable cub. "Don't worry, baby," she said, shooting me a look that could have melted industrial steel. "We'll hire a proper photographer, someone who actually knows what they're doing." And just like that, the decision was completely made. Not by democratic family discussion, not by careful budget consideration, not by any kind of reasonable decision-making process. Rachel had definitively spoken, and apparently in our household, that was the equivalent of a final Supreme Court ruling with no appeals allowed. That photographer ultimately cost $2,000. The pictures were admittedly beautiful. I wasn't featured in any of them. After that Sweet 16 photographer fiasco, something fundamental shifted in the Thompson household dynamics. It was like Rachel and Emma had attended some secret meeting where they collectively decided that the most effective way to deal with me was to pretend I'd been mysteriously raptured while they weren't looking. Breakfast became this elaborate choreographed dance where I was the only participant who didn't know the steps. I'd come downstairs expecting our usual routine, only to find empty cereal bowls in the sink and a brief note on the counter. Gone to get coffee. Back later. R&E. Like they were some kind of law firm specializing in husband avoidance. The dinner situation became even more creatively cruel. Every evening I'd come home from work expecting some version of normal family dinner, only to find Rachel and Emma sprawled on the couch, surrounded by pizza boxes and Chinese takeout containers, watching some movie they'd clearly started without me. "Hey," I'd say, loosening my tie and trying to sound casual. "Save me any pizza?" They'd both look up with these expressions of mild surprise, like they'd just noticed a random stranger had wandered into their house uninvited. "Oh, we didn't know when you'd be home," Rachel would say without pausing whatever they were watching. "There might be some left in the kitchen." Might be some left, like I was some kind of unexpected guest rather than the guy who'd been living in this house and paying the mortgage for 16 years. The pizza boxes would be completely empty except for maybe one sad slice with all the good toppings meticulously picked off. The real masterpiece of their Ignore Jason campaign was the grocery shopping incident. I came home from work one Thursday to discover a completely empty refrigerator. Not low on food, completely barren, like someone had backed up a truck and hauled away everything remotely edible. Rachel," I called out, staring into what looked like a post-apocalyptic wasteland. "Did we get robbed by extremely hungry burglars?" She appeared in the doorway with that perfected expression suggesting I'd just asked the stupidest question in human history. "We went shopping." "Okay. But where's all the food?" "We bought what we needed." I opened the fridge again, thinking maybe I'd somehow missed something. Nope. Still empty except for a bottle of ketchup and something that might have been cheese but could easily have been a biological science experiment. "What about me? What about you?" That's when I realized they hadn't forgotten to buy food for me. They'd deliberately chosen not to. This wasn't oversight or poor planning. This was intentional exclusion with a grocery budget. That night, I found the divorce papers casually sitting on the kitchen counter next to the coffee maker, positioned as casually as a grocery list. No ceremony, no dramatic confrontation, no tearful conversation about how we'd grown apart, just a stack of legal documents with sticky notes marking where I was supposed to sign. 3 words written on a Post-it stuck to the front page. "Sign here. R." The terms were absolutely brutal. Custody arrangements giving me every other weekend like I was some kind of part-time parent who'd never changed a diaper or helped with homework or stayed up all night when Emma had the flu. Alimony payments that would leave me eating ramen noodles until I qualified for Social Security. Asset division that somehow made Rachel the clear winner of our 18-year marriage lottery, while I got to keep my tie collection and whatever microscopic amount of dignity I had left. Standing there at 2 a.m., holding those papers, clarity struck me like a freight train carrying an entire cargo load of sudden understanding. I didn't have to sign these papers. I didn't have to keep playing along with their cruel game. I could just leave, not abandon my responsibilities like some deadbeat dad, but remove myself from this toxic situation before it completely destroyed whatever remained of my self-respect. I packed my old college duffel bag with essentials and left a note on my pillow. "Gone to think. Don't worry about me. Jay." The train station at 3 a.m. is like purgatory for people whose lives have gone completely sideways. I bought a ticket to my hometown where my parents still lived and spent 3 hours thinking about what I was doing. Was I running away? Maybe. Was I having a midlife crisis? Probably. Was I making the right decision? I had absolutely no idea. But it had to be better than staying in a house where I was treated like a ghost with mortgage payment responsibilities. 5 years later, I'd completely rebuilt my life from scratch. My own apartment at Cedar Ridge. Nothing fancy, but entirely mine. I worked construction with Big Mike's crew, and the physical labor was perfect therapy. Every nail driven, every wall framed was tangible proof of accomplishment. Plus, the crew actually talked to me, made jokes, included me in conversations. They called me Dad Jokes Jason because my humor, completely unappreciated by my former family, was exactly what they needed. Then, one Tuesday evening, my phone rang. Unknown number. Almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Jason?" Rachel's voice hit like a devastating gut punch. Yeah, I'm here. I wasn't sure this was still your number. It's still my number. I'd kept it hoping Emma might reach out. 5 years of hope, and instead I get Rachel. Jason, Emma's getting married. My entire world tilted sideways. Married? Yes, to a wonderful man named Alex. They met in college, been together 2 years, weddings next month. Finding out via random Tuesday phone call, not formal invitation. Congratulations, I managed weakly. Jason, you should come. She's your daughter. You should be there. After 5 years of complete silence, she's inviting me like it's perfectly normal. Oh, now I exist? Now I'm her father? Need someone to pay for catering? Please don't be like this. Be like what? Surprised that after 5 years I'm suddenly resurrected for a wedding invitation? Long pause. She misses you, Rachel said quietly. Funny way of showing it. 5 years without a call, text, birthday card, nothing. People change. Time changes things. Yeah, changed me from someone who'd drop everything for family into someone who learned to live without them. But even saying it, my resolve wavered. My daughter. Getting married to someone I'd never met. Just think about it, please. April 15th, 2 p.m., Lakeside Country Club. I'll think about it. Against all logic, I knew I'd go. Lakeside Country Club screamed obscene wealth. Marble columns, crystal chandeliers, enough flowers for a small florist shop. I sat in my Honda for 10 minutes watching guests arrive in luxury cars while I wore my Men's Warehouse sale suit. I found a back seat during the ceremony. Recognized nobody. Rachel's friends, Alex's family, Emma's college crowd I'd never met. Tourist at my own daughter's wedding. Then Emma appeared in a stunning dress, walking down the aisle with some stranger I'd never seen. Not me. Some random guy playing the role I'd been written out of. Then Emma's eyes found mine. Pure shock, like spotting Bigfoot. Her step faltered before she recovered. Claire had invited me without telling her. The ceremony proceeded beautifully. At the reception, I grabbed a beer and found a corner. Whispers started. Who's that guy? During dinner, Alex's aunt leaned toward me. So, how do you know the happy couple? The table went silent. I'm her father, I said simply. Absolute silence. Words spread like wildfire. Rachel looked like she'd swallowed a grenade. Emma's smile had frozen. Alex's cousin asked, Where were you during wedding planning? All eyes turned to Emma. Come on, sweetie, I called loudly. Tell them where Daddy's been for 5 years. Emma took a deep breath. He abandoned us. Abandoned? That's the story. You left without saying anything. I stood up. Really? Because I remember being ignored for a month straight, treated like a broken Alexa device that nobody wanted to acknowledge. You were annoying, she finally confessed. Deafening silence. Alex, looking increasingly confused, spoke up. Wait, you ignored your own father on purpose? Alex, it's complicated. How is it complicated? You told me he abandoned you. You never said you ignored him until he left. It was exactly like that, I said cheerfully. For a solid month, completely invisible. They even asked each other if they heard something when I tried talking, like I was a creaking floorboard. Alex stared at his new wife. You ghosted your father, then lied about it? He was being dramatic, Emma said weakly. Dramatic? I checked mirrors to confirm I still had a reflection. Alex's face went through several color changes. Is this true? Emma looked around desperately. It's not that simple. Seems pretty simple. You ghosted your father, then told everyone he abandoned you. Alex, please, can we talk later? No, I can't be married to someone who thinks treating family like that is okay. Then in front of 200 guests, Alex delivered the line that would echo for years. Weddings canceled. I don't want to be married to someone who thinks ghosting your own father is normal behavior. He walked out, just like that, left his bride standing there in her expensive dress, surrounded by the smoking ruins of what should have been the happiest day of her life. The exodus was spectacular. Guests scattered, muttering excuses. Emma stood there, mascara running. Rachel desperately followed guests making apologies. Me? I walked to the dessert table and grabbed a fancy dinner roll. Actually, pretty good. Jason, Rachel appeared, voice shaking. Say something. Fix this? I felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction. Just peace. Like a 5-year weight had lifted. Fix what? Your daughter learned actions have consequences. Alex learned he almost married someone who thinks family loyalty is optional. Everyone got educated. Please, Emma said, just say something. You know what? This has been the best wedding meal I've ever had. top-shelf entertainment, great catering, and a karma lesson worth admission. I straightened my discount tie and headed out. Where are you going? Home, to my apartment where people don't pretend I don't exist. 5 years ago, they'd erased me like a mistake. Tonight, I'd come back louder than a fire alarm, and nobody could pretend they didn't hear me. I walked out, got in my Honda, drove home laughing so hard I had to pull over twice. Freedom tastes like dinner rolls, tastes even better with perfectly served consequences.